Hello, I'm Tom Rothman of 20th Century Fox. Welcome to Fox Legacy. We're glad to have you with us tonight. I am forgetful! A pitch in the movie world is a term of art, and an odd thing, actually. A pitch is when a director or a writer or a producer comes to a studio and tells them what the movie is they want to make. Now, this is odd because movies aren't told. They're first written, then shown. I am, notoriously, not a fan of pitches. I mean, talk is cheap after all, and movies are decidedly not cheap. I could pitch you playing point guard for the Lakers. Listen, I can penetrate off the dribble, I can hit the step back three, I run the triangle offense. It sounds convincing, doesn't it? But the actual playing, maybe not so much. Invariably, pitches reference only incredibly successful films. They'll tell you it's Titanic meets Gone with the Wind, or Tonal Impossibilities, it's Something About Mary meets Ordinary People. One I remember very well, the first line began, "It's about death, but not in a dark way." Still, it is true that some great films have occasionally, against all the odds, been born from pitches. Here at Fox, probably the greatest and most unusual pitch story in our history concerns Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. In 1995, Baz was a young and incredibly gifted Australian filmmaker who had made one winning but deeply eccentric Australian film called Strictly Ballroom. He came to a young executive at Fox named Peter Rice with the idea of remaking Romeo and Juliet, but in a radically different way. And as his particular take on it was hard to glean from the page, Baz was to come in and pitch the studio head, Peter Chernin. In that pitch, Baz, for 1 hour solid, uninterrupted, told his version of Romeo and Juliet. It was a world complete with cars and airplanes, music by Prince. This is what it sounds like when doves cry. And guns with brand names like Dagger and Rapier. It was only at the very end that he happened to disclose that, oh yes, by the way, the dialogue would in fact still be in the original Shakespearean English.
Thus from my lips by thine my sin is purged.
And have my lips the sin that they have took?
Sin from my lips? O trespass sweetly urged, give me my sin again.
Baz followed up this pitch with a short video concept test, and eventually Peter Chernin greenlit the film. A feature that, lo and behold, not only lived up to every word of his pitch, but actually surpassed it.
Either thou or I or both must go with him! Either thou or I or both must go with him!
The 1990s were a fantastic period for Shakespeare on film, maybe the greatest period since Olivier's Assault in the 40s and the 50s. We had Ken Branagh's peerless adaptations of Henry V and Much Ado About Nothing, both done for the daring Sam Goldwyn Jr. We had Al Pacino's wholly original Looking for Richard, an exploration of Richard III. And we had, of course, Baz Luhrmann's R&J. I had the great fortune and privilege of working in varying capacities on all four of these films. And of all of them, Romeo and Juliet presented a unique challenge because it followed on the most successful Shakespeare movie ever made, Zeffirelli's 1968 classic and classical Romeo and Juliet. So for Baz to reinvent that took daring imagination, tremendous stylistic confidence, and great verve. And the version of Romeo and Juliet that you're about to see, well, it went on to be an enormous global hit, actually surpassing Zeffirelli. So in retrospect, I guess it seems pretty obvious. Why not Miami Beach? Guns instead of swords, cars instead of horses. But believe me, at the time, it seemed close to lunacy. But I guess that's part of the mysterious alchemy of great filmmaking. In the hands of a true visionary, the size of the risk can be proportionate to the size of the artistic and commercial rewards, or failure. The first scene that came back to Fox from Mexico City, where Baz was filming, was the scene where Romeo and Juliet first meet. Now, this is a scene staged countless times on stage and screen. But in Bazland, the lovers meet through a fish tank. When we sat and watched those dailies of the two of them seeing each other with the fish swimming in between, an idea, by the way, that Baz got from a restaurant in Miami where the men's and the ladies' restrooms were separated by a fish tank, well, we knew that this movie would be unlike anything that had happened before, and as far from Zeffirelli as you could imagine. We also knew that we were in the hands of a new master filmmaker. Because, borrowing from Shakespeare's words, there was a method in Baz's madness. The reason for the contemporary music, the contemporary settings, the contemporary props was that Baz believed if he'd make the story relevant to a young audience of today, he could achieve something close to the impact that happened when Shakespeare himself first wrote the play. And in that, he succeeded wholly and completely. Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet has gone on to become an absolute talisman film for an entire generation. So, sit back, watch, and marvel. But do remember, we are all but fortune's fools. Dailies, or as they are sometimes called, rushes, are the developed film from each individual day of shooting. The crew shoots the film, it's sent into the lab overnight, developed, and then sent two places, to the director on the set to look at, and to the studio the next day to look at. For Fox, the Romeo and Juliet dailies produced one of the many extra benefits of embracing the risk of that film. We were sitting at the studio, watching the dailies, and seeing the young Leonardo DiCaprio, who would go on to be one of the finest, most versatile actors of his generation, become a star right before our eyes. This was at the very moment that James Cameron was trying to cast the lead in Titanic for Fox. It was off of those dailies that we recommended to Cameron that he take a look at the young actor with so much presence and power. Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic, and the rest is happily history. And beyond even that great luck, R&J begat Baz Luhrmann's Moulin Rouge for Fox, and now a new film. You see, Strictly Ballroom, Romeo and Juliet, and Moulin Rouge combined to form what Baz calls his Red Curtain trilogy. They are all of a stylistic piece, all exaggerated, extravagant, and larger than life. The movie that Baz is making for Fox now, in Australia and called Australia, with Nicole Kidman and Hugh Jackman, is actually very different from that. It is a grand and sweeping romance, an action-adventure epic that's told realistically in the vein of Giant or The African Queen. And yet, however realistic it may be, in its majesty and originality, any film from Baz Luhrmann is an experience all of its own. For Fox Legacy, I'm Tom Rothman. We'll see you next time. Good night.